Before Jeremy Corbyn became the Labour of the leader, Labour of the leader party, leader of the Labour
Sorry,
Party.
one question actually. Is this the only time that he's been the leader, or in the past he was also the leader?
No, this was his only time as a leader. Yeah, yeah, and not just his first and only time, probably the first and possibly the only time a real hardcore left-wing member of the parliament became a leader. He became he's been a member of the Labour Party since he was a teenager. He became a member of the parliament in early 1980s. He was a member of the parliament for 30 years. And he was in many ways, I think he was the most rebellious Labour Party member when Labour Party was in the government. He had the most times that he voted against the government. So he was very anti-Blair in many ways. He comes from a Tony Benn tradition on the left of the Labour Party, which is very pro-state expenditure, and very, actually, this is something that we're going to come back to, very anti-EU. Tony Benn, people on the left in the 80s, they were actually very anti-EU. They viewed EU as a capitalist institution that institutionalized capitalist institutions within Europe. So he comes from that tradition. He was extremely rebellious. He always in the labor conferences gave speeches against many of the labor policies that embraced market economy and embraced foreign wars. He was a chairman of the Stop the War Coalition campaign, which brought about I think more than 1 million people came to the streets against the war in Iraq in London. He was a keynote speaker. So he had great credentials in terms of being a hardcore left, anti-war, very anti-austerity, all that. But when he became a candidate for the leadership, he was seen as a bit of a joke, in a way that the left is always viewed as a joke. You need about 30 signatures to become a candidate. And the people who gave their signatures, said that they only gave their signatures to him because they wanted to widen the debate. It wasn't because they really wanted him to become the leader. Many of them said they regret giving those signatures when he became a serious candidate. But this was a time, two things worked hugely in Corbyn's benefit. One was that
So when is
probably,
this? Are we talking about 2016, 2017?
no, earlier. This is
Earlier.
I think 2014 perhaps. I have to check to see exactly when he became the leader, but I think even earlier. Um, mm, I'll check that right now.
Yeah.
But there were a few factors that hugely helped him. This was still the time that David Cameron was in the government, and austerity was was
Name
the
of the
big
game.
news of it. Yeah, basically, yeah. And he was very anti-austerity,
Yeah.
and no other candidate was as anti-austerity as him. There was a major austerity bill that the interim head of the Labour Party, Harriet Harman, the interim Labour leader, argued that the Labour members should vote for. It was a bill by the government, and all the other Labour leader candidates voted for it except Jeremy Corbyn. He didn't vote for it. So his anti-austerity stance at that moment really resonated with the Labour membership, who, this is the second factor, who were becoming increasingly young people, following a decision by Ed Miliband. Ed Miliband, the previous leader, had made it much easier to become a member of the Labour Party. You could basically pay a £3 membership fee, and you became a voting member of the party. I think the grassroots members' vote may have a slightly lesser value in terms of weighting and all that, but this was hugely in favor of Corbyn, because his supporters were mostly young people who were very anti-austerity.
So
This was their
they actually get to take part in electing a leader, the leader of the party.
yes, exactly. And during and because of Ed Miliband's policy, Labour Party became basically the largest Labour Party within Europe. I believe they have 600,000 members right now, or something like that. Although there has been some exodus since then.
Okay, this all makes a lot of sense because he was very popular among young leftists in the UK 4 or 5 years ago when he.
Yeah, yeah. He became the leader of the opposition in 2015. So I think we are talking about 2014 when the leadership contest was going
Yeah.
on, or early 2015. At any rate, he became, yeah, he in a surprising manner, he basically crushed his opponents. He got, I think, more than 55% of the votes, and he became the leader of the Labour Party. And from then on, the establishment was not happy with him. That was the one major issue. But he also had major relations with Palestinian groups. He had appeared in events that Hamas leaders or Hamas members, Hezbollah members had attended. He had appeared on Press TV, acting as Press TV is an Iranian funded news channel, kind of like Iranian version of RT. He had appeared on that as a guest host of George Galloway's show, phone-in show, would answer phone calls. So and Press TV was fined and by Ofcom, a media regulatory body in the UK, for making uh, anti-Semitic comments, I think on their Twitter account or on some of their shows. So all these things were a bit of a worrying signs for the Jewish members of the Labour Party, or at least some Jewish members of the Labour Party. And some people close to him, like Ken Livingstone and Naz Shah, a new. I think Naz Shah was a new member at the time, a member of the parliament who was a Labour supporter. I think she comes from Muslim background. Uh, they had, like, I think Naz Shah's she may have shared a cartoon that portrayed Israel as sort of Israeli flags silhouetted into US or something like that. So I think her case was a slightly less egregious as Ken Livingstone, former mayor of London, who made some comments that they are not historically necessarily completely wrong, but they were made in a very one-sided manner about Hitler's policies and Hitler's views on Zionism and blah blah blah. So people associated or close to Corbyn were viewed as anti-Semitic, and he was viewed as somebody who had associated himself with anti-Semitic organizations like Hezbollah and Hamas. Furthermore, many Jewish members complained about online harassment by his uh, fan base, who used apparently anti-Semitic uh, tropes to, to belittle Jewish members and such and such. This was a very long, and as you can see, it's still continuing. It's a never-ending story in many ways. So this became a bit of a game that, there was a complaints made. Jeremy Corbyn would come on, and at first he would be a bit resistant, saying that the issue is being exaggerated. For political opponents are exaggerating the extent of the problem, but we will look into the issues. We will do blah 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 blah. So regularly you would have complaints made, and then Labour leadership responding to those complaints. And one of the decisions taken by the Labour Party was to commission an internal report into the way that complaints about racism and specifically anti-Semitism were handled within the Labour Party. And
So is
that's
that the
where we
second report that also came out last week?
Yes. No, that didn't came out last week. That came out a few months ago. I don't remember exactly when. That and it didn't come out. It was leaked. I think I'm not even sure if it was leaked in full. It was leaked in partially. That was before we get into that report, let me say that, well, with all of this stuff happening, with all the media really going hardcore against Corbyn, he really got a treatment even worse than Bernie Sanders, because Bernie Sanders, because being Jewish, because being somewhat less, to be honest, less leftist than Corbyn, he got a slightly better treatment in U.S. media.
Yeah,
But
definitely. And I mean, and also the issues that Bernie Sanders really focuses on doesn't lend themselves too much to this kind of criticism.
to be honest, Corbyn also focuses largely on domestic
Domestic,
economic.
yeah. But I mean, Bernie Sanders is in a way almost exclusively focused on
Yeah, yeah.
domestic.
But yeah, uh, it's important. For example, just to give you an example of this, BB's probably the most high-profile political correspondent in the UK, Laura Kuenssberg. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. She works for BBC. uh, uh, Independent Commission, I forget, or was it Ofcom? They found that she made a report when there was a terrorist attack in the UK. She made a report in which she significantly misrepresent what Jeremy Corbyn said, in a way that, as if to say that he wouldn't kill the terrorist even if the terrorist was killing innocent people. And independent commission found BBC to be wrong on that case, and they said she breached impartiality rules of the BBC. So, this is not just me saying that Corbyn got a bad treatment. This was kind of, you could objectively see. Even BBC and Guardian were at some points saying that, wow, the treatment Corbyn is getting from because the Daily Mail and the hardcore right-wing press, they really went after Corbyn. And, they, like, it was personal, and it was awful. It was awful. At any rate, in 2017, though, Labour did much better than expected. They increased their voting share significantly. Basically, Conservatives lost their majority. It was a hung parliament.
That's
And
the election which saw May become the prime minister.
yes, well, no, May was prime minister before that. May became
Okay,
prime minister through internal
true.
party elections, but she was. This
She
was her
won that
second
one
term.
again. Yeah.
Yeah,
So he
but in
lost
a
two elections at the end. In
yes,
this,
yes, but he did much better than expected in that election, and he, considering the media, considering all of that, and uh, yeah, and conservatives did very badly, in a compared to what they expected, compared to what they. So, but then 2019 election is the opposite. Basically, Boris Johnson is the leader now, and he basically crushes the Labour, which, to be honest, that's what I was kind of referring to, the fact that the problem with Corbyn was, I think that's why basically we get into it hopefully in another video, but I think the main reason why they lost the election was Brexit, because they couldn't have a coherent message on the Brexit, because the young people who were a large part Corbyn's base were largely also pro-EU. But Corbyn came from a tradition, was somewhat anti-EU, although he wasn't necessarily now anti-EU. But and they couldn't balance the interests of different constituencies they had, and the media attacks, media misrepresentations, and Boris Johnson being much better than Theresa May as a communicator. All of that led to their destruction in 2019, and yeah, basically Labour lost the election in a massive way, So this was largely, I think if you were following the news at the time, you would see all of this. But then this report, from this internal report, was leaked, which was basically changed the way you look at everything during these 5 years. It turned out, because, by the way, let's not forget, from the very beginning, Jeremy Corbyn was accused of running a party within a party. There was this group called Momentum, who were like a group within the Labour Party where they were supporters of Jeremy Corbyn, and they were somewhat more aggressive in their marketing, I suppose, in their PR, and they were constantly accused of running a party within a party, and trying to deselect party members in constituencies, trying to divert funds to the members of the parliament they support. So this was allegations against Corbyn's team plus anti-Semitism. Then there was this leak, and in this report, it turned out there was a party within a party, and it turned out there was racism within a party, but it turned out it largely came from Jeremy Corbyn's opponents. And for example, in this report, it is outlined that, first of all, the thing that the Equality Commission also referred to, the complaint system is archaic, it's out of date, it's slow, but it's inherited from Corbyn's office, and Corbyn's office is trying to reform it, but there is resistance from the people within that structure. And there is, for example, I forgot to mention this. This is really important. There were 7 people who made serious allegations of anti-Semitism against the Labour Party. They were members of the Labour Party, and there was a documentary made by BBC, by Panorama, in which they made their allegations in a documentary format. And then Labour Party came out with a statement saying that, again, the allegations are being exaggerated for political purposes. They sued the Labour Party, and then Keir Starmer, against the lawyers' advices, decided to apologize to these people and give them basically money, give them compensation. One of these people, Sam Meadows, if I'm not mistaken, is one of the people that in this leaked report, it turned out he was constantly being contacted by the office on why are you not handling the reports about anti-Semitism? And he was sitting on the complaints for 6 months. This was his case. There was also, they found loads of WhatsApp messages in which the Labour leadership were discussed in the most disgusting terms possible. They were referred to as animals. They were insulted. There was many comments that had very much, I don't know, they had racist undertones, especially about Diane Abbott, who was a member of the parliament who was very close to Jeremy Corbyn. So basically, this internal report with many WhatsApp messages, many emails, showed that there was a party within a party, and this party within a party was working constantly against Labour leadership, Jeremy Corbyn. They even lamented, they were disappointed by Labour's performance in 2017 election, saying that they don't understand why they did so well and why our people are so stupid for voting for them. They said people who signed, gave their signatures for Corbyn to stand for leadership should be taken out and shot. In a really, probably the worst case of this whole thing, Diane Abbott is she's of African heritage, and she's constantly being, racist newspapers, right-wing newspapers in the UK harass her constantly. They use racist trope against her. Her location, she went for a coffee or a breakfast, they leaked her location to the press, to these basically paparazzi style reporters, and she had to hide in a toilet, and they were laughing about that and saying, oh, we hope she cried, or really disgusting stuff. And these people, Keir Starmer apologized to these people, and I think they paid them compensation against the lawyers' advices. The lawyers said that BBC breached its own rules and regulations by airing that Panorama documentary. But that documentary was just one part of a larger ordeal. Uh, so to be honest, I don't know if it was so much of a conspiracy by the establishment, or the feel you get from this leaked report is more bunch of bureaucrats who are trying to avoid working as much as they can and trying to find excuses for that. But still, what they do is disgusting. One of the more important thing they do, although this is less than 2% of the spending that Labour Party did in their election in 2019, was that they tried to divert funds from members of the parliament that they don't like, people who are supporters of Jeremy Corbyn, to people they like. For example, people like Tom Watson, deputy leader, who was a constant, uh, basically, he was a constant source of he was constantly basically undermining Jeremy Corbyn on many issues. So the exact things they were alleging Jeremy Corbyn did, they were doing. From uh, you know use of racist tropes, not anti-Semitic tropes, but racist tropes against black people, to forming a party within a party and diverting funds from certain members to other members, to leaking information to the press. Basically, it seems to me, at least, that there is a huge problem within the Labour Party, but it's not so. I'm not saying the left wing of the party is completely clean or anything. I'm sure there are anti-Semites, perhaps even racists, on the left wing of the party as well. But the right wing of the party and the people who Keir Starmer seems to be so so ready to defend and so ready to apologize to, they seem to be far more problematic in their racial views, in their cultural views, and frankly, in their ethical views. Many people, after this report was leaked, many people said that the diversion of the funds could constitute fraud. There needs to be serious look into the allegations. Both Keir Starmer and Deputy Leader Angela Rayner, they announced they're gonna do a report into this leaked report. But about 9 months has passed. I haven't heard much about it. I think I think they did do a press release in which they said that, yeah, it's been overstated. The leaked report is not final, and we don't necessarily agree with all of that. So it doesn't seem to be taken seriously by the current party leaders, and in my view, that's disappointing.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, the parallels with the US and the Democrats are striking, and Bernie Sanders in so many ways. Because just like Jeremy Corbyn, Bernie Sanders did much better the first time when he ran for president, and that was shocking. And there was also the exact same dynamic of two parties within a party, and the more right wing side, the Hillary Clinton side, doing everything, especially during the first election, to undermine, of course, Bernie Sanders. And then after that, even now, how all the pretty much the centrist Democrats got together at the end to make sure that Biden easily wins the primaries. So many parallels here.
Yeah, I say so. Although I would say Labour Party is somewhat more democratic in its leadership elections, at least. Uh, but there are significant parallels between Bernie Sanders and Jeremy Corbyn. In
The
fact, I think.
second report is fascinating, though. I mean, this internal report.
Yeah, I mean, it's just such it's one of those stories that really takes the life out of you in many ways, because this is, by the way, there was a whole other debate about the definition of anti-Semitism, and this was in like 2015, 2016 maybe, or 17. Then there was a report then commissioned by the Labour Party by uh, Miss Chakrabarti, who became a member of the House of Lords later on. And then it was about the fact that they wanted to extend the definition of anti-Semitism to saying that if you say that Israel came about on racist, the ideology behind behind Israel's foundation is racist. If you say that, then that's anti-Semitic. And then there was arguments that what if you're a Palestinian and this is a this is too broad of a definition, blah blah blah. And then at first Labour and many other parties didn't accept this definition. Then there was this report. It's one of those things that basically I think it's I do think, let me just make this clear, I do think anti-Semitism is real, anti-Semitism within Labour parties real, but I do think these type of thing, uh, identity politics in general, is used as a war of attrition against the left to basically slowly tire out and take the fire out of, because Corbyn's, when he came to when he became the leader and came to power, there was such excitement, people shouting, yeah, people singing, "Oh, Jeremy Corbyn," and all that. And these type of things, it's kind of mudslinging, and in the end, it does make you muddy, and it does slow you down, and it takes the fire out. So I do think they are used by. I think there are some truths that are sadly used by political opportunists to advance their own uh, political positions, basically. And sadly, I think identity politics, and sadly, I think in this case, uh, in anti-Semitism was used in this way. Let me just to make my feelings clear, because I don't want to be misunderstood on this, because genuinely anti this is something that one of my heroes, possibly, well, not just heroes, role models, because I respect his work so much. Hero is such a douchebaggy like way of saying things, but I'm sure you like him too. Norman Finkelstein, who's a great author, writes about Israeli-Palestinian conflicts a lot. I think this was in the beginning of the when anti-Semitism became a big issue in regards to Jeremy Corbyn, and when, like, in his view, he saw people using Holocaust as a excuse for their political ends, and he saw this as a disgusting thing, and I agree with that. So let me read this quote, which I think encapsulates my feeling and his feelings, of course. What are they doing? Don't they have any respect for the dead? All these desiccated labor apparatchiks dragging the Nazi Holocaust through the mud for the sake of their petty jostling for power and position. Have they no shame? I think the internal report clearly shows us that they have no shame, and they're willing to use any form of, uh, you know, identity politics, whatever politics, to be honest, for their own ends. So, that's basically the overall perspective. I think that's a good, basically, helicopter view of the situation.
No, yeah, Norman Finkelstein is someone who's been a critic of Israel pretty much his whole life, and of course he himself is a Jew. And if I'm not mistaken, his parents, both of his parents on both sides, they pretty much lost their entire family during the
All of
Holocaust.
us.
Yeah,
Yes,
so it
yes.
is very real for him. But I just want to go back to the other.
But by the way, one more thing. One of the times Corbyn was criticized was for the fact that he brought in a Holocaust survivor. I forget his name, but a famous Holocaust survivor who again was an opponent of the Israeli state, and he said that, yeah, he was very much against the use of Holocaust for any political ends. And I think he brought him in the parliament, and he was heavily criticized for that in the parliament. So again, I think we should, and I think Corbyn's view is that we should definitely differentiate criticisms of Israeli state from criticisms, from anti-Semitic uh, tropes and behavior. And one more thing, America, as Aaron Bastani, a political commentator, mentioned, America was founded based on a genocide of the indigenous people of America. This is a non-controversial thing to say, right? So there may be some people who view Israel's foundation in that way too. That does not mean that they view today's people of Israel as anyway responsible for those crimes that happened about 100 years ago. There is no crime doesn't get passed through genes. So I think there needs to be a discussion about the parameters of the discussions about Israel, about Jewish identity and all that. So that needs to still be discussed, because people may come from different places, may have different cultural backgrounds, and they may not be anti-Semitic. They just may have some historical differences in understanding.
No, 100%. And I mean, it's very unfortunate and sad that something so real, such as anti-Semitism, which continues to even be a problem around the world, is always used to counter any kind of criticism made of Israel and its policies and the government.
Yes, that's sad. And by the way, it's not just anti-Semitism. Anti-Semitism is something that gets a lot of coverage in the West, right? But racist behavior towards Muslim is regularly used by authoritarian Islamic leaders as a justification for their policies, or as a distraction. Same negative views on Asian people and that type of thing has been used by authoritarian powers within Asian countries. So sadly, political identity tends to lend itself to abuse a lot, sadly.
Yeah, and just earlier on, I just wanted to comment on one thing and then we'll wrap up this video. When you're talking about how the whole allegations about anti-Semitism and how, it just surrounded Corbyn, just the mainstream media is so good at that with some kind of issue like that. Anytime they probably spoke with him, even if after that they move on to other issues, they start with that and it just sets the tone. And after a while, it does become what people, what the general public associate you with, the 2 or 3 things that they're mentioned all the time about, and one of them being anti-Semitism. I mean, of course that's going to surround you no matter how many times you fight it back, and if you're given chances to talk about other things. But
yeah, although to be honest, I genuinely don't think, because UK is a completely different country than US in many ways, I genuinely don't think it really didn't work. I hopefully when we do our long
that it didn't work, or
I don't think it's really. I think it did have some effect, obviously, but the main reason why Labour lost the election and was, in my view, was more about Brexit than anti-Semitism. That's one aspect, and I do think Corbyn was also partially. Corbyn was way too naive in my view, and way too committed to whole communitarian principles. He should have acted more aggressively. And oh, by the way, that's why in our previous section about what happened specifically this week, I said I'm somewhat pessimistic about what's going to happen next, is because like when Corbyn was in power, he was all acting so conciliatory, and he was acting so weak. Now he's not in power. So sadly, I wish he used the power of the leadership more. But no, I don't think anti-Semitism. I think it did made the party muddy. It wasted time. It distracted voters. Blah blah blah. But no, I don't think it was crucial to a huge extent, because UK Jewish people are not, there is no IPAC in UK, as there is great Al Jazeera documentary about political influence of certain Israeli foundations, but it's not quite the same, so I don't think it had significant, and media is losing its power, blah blah blah.
Okay. Alright, so if you like this video, please make sure to give it a thumbs up, and if you loved it, please make sure to subscribe to our channel, and we'll see you next time.